Why was everyone laughing at the woman with shaking hands? The California sun beat down on the Coronado facility courtyard. 20 elite trainees stood in formation, all eyes on one person. Autumn Hayes. She stood at the back, curly reddish-brown hair pulled tight in a ponytail, piercing blue eyes that didn't meet anyone's gaze, military green t-shirt, dark army pants, porcelain skin with freckles scattered across her cheeks, and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Hey, shaky hands. Bryce Knox's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. His laugh was sharp, cruel. You think you can hold a rifle with those trembling fingers? The courtyard erupted in laughter. Autumn looked down at her hands. They shook with a rhythm she couldn't control, a tremor that had followed her since Afghanistan, since the mission that had changed everything. But they didn't know that. They couldn't know. Seriously, who let the disabled into this place? Sloan Ree's voice rang out from the front of the formation. Blonde hair pulled back, smile sharp as broken glass. This camp is for warriors, not a hospital ward. More laughter. Phones came out. Someone was already recording. At least 20 people starring, judging, writing her off before she'd even begun. Commander Sterling stood on the observation platform. His face was stone, cold gray eyes calculating, watching. His chest was covered in ribbons, each one a story he'd never tell, each one a mission that remained classified. But his jaw clenched when he looked at Autumn. Just for a moment. Almost imperceptible. Because he recognized something, or thought he did. A ghost from 5 years ago, a mission in the Afghan mountains, a woman who was supposed to be dead. But that was impossible. Wasn't it? The morning air was thick with contempt. Autumn absorbed every word, every laugh, every pointed finger. Her breathing stayed controlled, measured. Her blue eyes cataloged every face, every voice, every detail that would matter later. Because they always mattered later. Dr. Whitmore watched from the medical station, her brow furrowed. She scrolled through Autumn's file on her tablet. The medical records were sparse, too sparse. Classification markers scattered throughout. Entire years missing from what should have been a comprehensive history. Something wasn't right. All right, listen up. Sterling's voice cut through the chatter like a knife through flesh. Today we separate those who belong here from those who don't. He descended from the platform, each footfall deliberate, heavy with authority. Anyone who can't handle the pressure can walk to that gate right now and save us all some time. His gaze lingered on Autumn. Just a second longer than necessary. A micro-expression of contempt that only the most observant would catch. But Autumn caught it. She caught everything. The equipment distribution began with military efficiency. Sergeant Torres ran the quartermaster station. When Autumn approached, he didn't bother hiding his disdain. What size you need, sweetheart? Extra small. He tossed her a tactical vest that was clearly 2 sizes too large. The straps dangled uselessly. Maybe you can grow into it. No response from Autumn. She caught the oversized gear and moved to a quiet corner, her hands still trembling visibly, but they began working the adjustment straps with surprising precision. Each knot tied with economy of movement. Muscle memory from countless repetitions under pressure. Within 90 seconds, the vest fit perfectly, transformed from an ill-fitting handicap into professional-grade equipment. Indy Rivers, a sympathetic trainee from Texas, noticed. She whispered to her neighbor, "Did you see how she adjusted that gear? That wasn't amateur work." The observation was lost in the general commotion. Bryce deliberately shouldered past Autumn, using his considerable mass to knock her off balance. Instead of stumbling, Autumn's feet automatically adjusted. Her center of gravity shifted with fluid grace. Someone who had absorbed far worse impacts. The movement was so natural, so ingrained, that she seemed to flow around the aggression rather than resist it. "Oops," Bryce sneered, not bothering to look back. "Maybe you should stick to desk duty where you can't get hurt." Sloane had her phone out, live streaming to her followers. "Okay, family, you won't believe what I'm seeing here. Some girl with literal shaking hands thinks she can hang with Navy SEALs. The second-hand embarrassment is real. This is going to be painful to watch." Her viewer count was climbing steadily. Word was spreading about the unfolding drama. The morning's first exercise was basic weapon familiarization, a routine drill that every recruit was expected to complete within 5 minutes. M4 carbines were distributed, each one meticulously maintained, identical in specifications. The task was simple: disassemble, clean, and reassemble the weapon while being timed. Most trainees approached their rifles with careful deliberation, students following a memorized procedure. They fumbled slightly with pins and springs, consulted mental checklists, generally performed competently, if unremarkably. Autumn picked up her weapon and simply began working. Her trembling hands moved with mechanical precision. Each component removed and set aside in perfect order. There was no hesitation, no checking of reference materials, no pause for consideration. The rifle came apart as if it were dissolving under her touch, parts arranged in a grid pattern that spoke of obsessive attention to detail. Sergeant Torres glanced at his stopwatch and frowned. "Holy," he muttered, drawing the attention of nearby instructors. "She's at 45 seconds and hasn't made a single mistake." The reassembly was even more impressive. Each component found its place with inevitable certainty, the weapon flowing back together like a complex mechanical symphony. When Autumn set the completed rifle down and stepped back, the timer showed 1 minute and 15 seconds. A time that would have been impressive for a seasoned armorer, let alone a recruit with evident motor control issues. Commander Sterling had been watching from a distance, his expression unreadable. As other instructors gathered around Autumn's station, marveling at her performance, Sterling's mind raced back to Afghanistan. 5 years ago. The mountains, the snow, the mission that had gone so wrong. And the sniper with trembling hands who had saved his entire unit before disappearing into the night. Before supposedly dying in an explosion that left no body to recover. He pushed the thought away. Coincidence had to be. But what if it wasn't? What if she had survived? What if she was standing right in front of him? And if she was, why was she here? What was she looking for? The questions hung in the air like smoke, unanswered, heavy with implications Sterling didn't want to consider. Because if Autumn Hayes was who he thought she was, then nothing about this training exercise was what it seemed. And everyone in this courtyard was about to learn a lesson they'd never forget. In exactly 18 minutes, that green t-shirt would be torn open during a combat drill. And the cobra tattoo across her back would be revealed. The same tattoo Sterling had seen once before. In the Afghan mountains. On the woman who wasn't supposed to exist. What happens when the weakest person in the room becomes the most dangerous? The obstacle course stretched across the Coronado facility like a serpent of steel and rope, walls to climb, trenches to cross, ropes to swing, a gauntlet designed to break the unprepared. Bryce Knox stood at the starting line, chest puffed out, confidence radiating from every muscle. "Watch and learn, people," he announced to the gathered crowd. "This is how a real warrior moves." He attacked the course with aggressive efficiency, vaulting walls, powering through obstacles. His time was respectable, not exceptional but solid enough to earn nods of approval from the instructors. When he finished, he turned to Autumn with a smirk. "Your turn, Shaky. Try not to hurt yourself." Autumn approached the starting line. Her hands were still trembling. Visibly. Constantly. The crowd whispered. Phones were raised. Everyone expected spectacular failure. The buzzer sounded. Autumn moved. And something changed. The trembling hands that had seemed like a liability suddenly became something else entirely. Each movement was precise, calculated. She didn't power through obstacles like Bryce had done. She flowed through them. Over the first wall with minimal effort, her body positioning perfect, weight distribution exact. Through the tire run without breaking stride, her feet finding the center of each tire with rhythmic certainty. Across the rope bridge with balance that defied the visible tremor in her hands. Sergeant Torres checked his stopwatch again. She's 20 seconds ahead of Knox's pace. Impossible. But the timer didn't lie. Autumn crossed the finish line. The stopwatch showed a time that would have placed her in the top 5% of all recruits in the facility's history. Silence fell across the courtyard. Bryce's smirk had vanished. Sloane's phone was still recording, but her commentary had stopped. Commander Sterling stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. Interesting performance, Hayes. His voice was measured, controlled. Where did you train before arriving here? Autumn met his gaze. Various locations, sir. Standard military preparation. Standard. Sterling repeated the word like he was tasting it, testing it for truth. There was nothing standard about what I just watched. I do my best, sir. Your best. Another pause, another test. What unit were you with before this? That's classified, sir. The courtyard went dead silent. Recruits didn't have classified backgrounds. Soldiers with years of service, special operators, intelligence personnel. But not recruits. Not people who showed up to basic training. Sterling's jaw tightened. Dr. Whitmore was suddenly very interested in her tablet, scrolling through files, making connections. Her medical training told her that someone with the level of tremor Autumn displayed shouldn't be capable of the physical performance they'd just witnessed. Unless the tremor was caused by something specific. Something that wouldn't affect gross motor control. Something like nerve damage from extreme cold exposure. Or high-altitude operations. Or prolonged sniper positions in mountain environments. The pieces were starting to come together. And they painted a picture that made no sense for a basic training recruit. Garrett Wyatt, a quiet trainee who'd been observing from the sidelines, noticed something else. The way Autumn had moved through the course wasn't just efficient. It was tactical. Every movement had served a dual purpose, testing fields of fire, identifying cover positions, evaluating sight lines. She wasn't just completing an obstacle course. She was running a reconnaissance patrol. In a training exercise. Why would someone do that unless they were looking for something? Or watching for someone? The lunch break came with a tension that hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Most trainees ate together, talking, joking, building camaraderie. Autumn sat alone. Not because she was excluded, but because she chose to be. Her trembling hands managed the fork and knife with the same precision she'd shown on the rifle. Each movement small, controlled, conserved energy. Indy Rivers approached with her tray. Mind if I sit? Autumn looked up, evaluated, decided. Free country. Indy sat down. She didn't immediately speak, just ate for a moment, comfortable with silence. Finally, that was impressive, on the course. Thank you. Where'd you learn to move like that? Here and there. That's not an answer. Autumn's blue eyes flickered with something. Amusement, maybe, or respect for directness. No, it's not. Indy smiled. Fair enough, she paused. Just so you know, not everyone here is like Bryce and Sloane. I know. You do. I've been watching. The way she said it sent a small chill down Indy's spine. Watching. Not just seeing, not just observing. Watching. Like a predator studies prey. Or like an operator studies a battlefield. Across the courtyard, Commander Sterling stood in the shade of a building. His phone was pressed to his ear. His voice was low, urgent. "I need you to run a name for me. Autumn Hayes. Hays. Yes, I know it's irregular, just do it." A pause. "I don't care if it takes clearance. Use mine. Authorization code Delta 79er Tango." Another pause, longer this time. "Are you certain?" Sterling's voice had gone very quiet. "Completely certain." Whatever the voice on the other end said made Sterling's face go pale. "Understood. Send me everything you have, and keep this conversation off the record." He hung up, stood there for a long moment, staring at Autumn across the courtyard. The woman who wasn't supposed to exist was eating lunch like she belonged there. And Sterling had just learned something that changed everything. The file on Autumn Hayes existed, but it was buried under so many classification layers that accessing it had triggered automatic alerts to military intelligence. Someone very important wanted to know who was asking about her. And why? The afternoon sun climbed higher. The real test was about to begin. Hand-to-hand combat training. And Autumn was about to show them exactly what those trembling hands could do. How much can a person hide before the truth breaks through? The combat training mat was 20 feet by 20 feet, padded, surrounded by eager trainees who smelled blood in the water. Bryce Knox volunteered first. Of course he did. "I'll go easy on you," he told Autumn with a grin that showed too many teeth. "Wouldn't want to break our delicate flower." Instructor Vasquez, a compact woman with the build of a bulldog and the temperament to match, raised an eyebrow. "This is controlled sparring. The objective is to demonstrate technique, not to injure your partner. Is that understood, Knox?" "Crystal clear, ma'am." But his eyes said something different. Autumn stepped onto the mat. Her hands were still trembling. She wore the same military green t-shirt. The fabric stretched across her shoulders, across her back. Across the tattoo nobody knew was there. Yet, Vasquez blew the whistle. Bryce moved forward with confidence, using his size advantage, his reach, his strength. He threw a controlled jab. Autumn slipped it. He threw a cross. She deflected it. He tried a takedown, and suddenly found himself on his back, staring up at the California sky, wondering what the hell had just happened. Autumn stood over him, her trembling hand extended to help him up. "Good effort," she said quietly. The trainees around the mat had gone silent. Bryce scrambled to his feet, his face red, humiliation burning in his chest like acid. "Again," he growled. Vasquez nodded, reset. They squared up again. This time Bryce didn't hold back. He came in hard, aggressive, using his full strength. And Autumn dismantled him. Every attack redirected, every advance turned into a vulnerability. She didn't fight with power. She fought with precision, with timing, with years of experience that shouldn't exist in someone her age. Within 30 seconds, Bryce was on his back again. This time breathing hard. Frustrated. Confused. "Where did you learn that?" Vasquez demanded, her professional interest overriding protocol. "Various instructors, ma'am. That's not standard hand-to-hand curriculum." "No, ma'am." "What is it?" Autumn hesitated. For just a moment. Krav Maga, mixed with some Russian systema, and field adaptations. Field adaptations. The words hung in the air like a confession. You don't learn field adaptations in a gym. You learn them in actual combat. in situations where failure means death. Commander Sterling was watching from the observation platform again. His encrypted phone had been buzzing with messages for the past 20 minutes. Messages he couldn't answer in public. Messages that confirmed what he already suspected. Autumn Hayes was not a recruit. She was an operator. A ghost. Someone who worked so deep in the shadows that her very existence was classified at level that made Sterling's clearance look like a library card. But why was she here? What was she looking for? The answer came 15 minutes later. During a drill that required removing outer layers of tactical gear. Autumn pulled off her combat vest, then her outer shirt, standing there in just her military green t-shirt. That's when Bryce, still smarting from his humiliation, decided to escalate. "What's the matter, Hayes? Got something to hide under that shirt?" He grabbed the back of her collar, yanked hard. The fabric tore, and the cobra tattoo was revealed. It stretched across Autumn's entire upper back, intricate, detailed, a cobra with its hood spread, fangs bared, ready to strike. But it wasn't just any tattoo. It was a specific design, one that only existed in classified military databases. The mark of the Mountain Vipers, an elite special operations unit that officially didn't exist. A unit that operated in the highest mountains of Afghanistan. A unit that had been wiped out 5 years ago in an operation that remained classified. A unit that Commander Sterling had worked with. Once, in the Hindu Kush, where he'd met a sniper with trembling hands and ice-blue eyes who had saved his life. A sniper who had died in an explosion. Or so the official report had said. Sterling went pale. Actually pale. The color draining from his face like water from a broken glass. Because he knew that tattoo. He'd seen it before. On the woman who'd pulled him and his men out of an ambush. On the woman who'd held a rifle steady in sub-zero temperatures while her hands shook from nerve damage. On the woman who wasn't supposed to be alive. Sloane's phone captured every second. The torn shirt, the tattoo, Sterling's reaction. The video was already going viral. But what Sloane didn't know was that she just recorded something that would trigger automatic responses from military intelligence. Something that would bring very serious people to Coronado. Very soon. Autumn turned slowly. Her blue eyes locked with Sterling's gray ones. Across the distance of the training yard, a silent conversation happened. Recognition. Confirmation. And a question, why? Sterling's encrypted phone buzzed again. This time he answered. Sterling. A voice he didn't recognize. Cold, professional, absolutely certain of its authority. Commander, you need to clear the training yard. Now. And you need to place Hayes under protective supervision. We have a situation. What kind of situation? The kind that explains why an operator we sent in undercover is currently having her identity broadcast to the internet. Sterling's blood went cold. She's undercover here. Affirmative, and her cover just got blown, which means whoever she was hunting now knows exactly where she is. The pieces fell into place. Autumn wasn't here to train. She was here to hunt. Someone in this facility was compromised. Someone was feeding information to hostile intelligence. And Autumn had volunteered to be the bait. To draw them out. But now her cover was blown. Now she was exposed. Now she was in danger. Sterling started moving. Lockdown protocol, initiate now. Alarms began to sound across the facility. Confused trainees looked around, wondering what was happening, wondering why the base was suddenly going into emergency procedures. Autumn stood in the center of the training yard, her torn shirt exposing the cobra tattoo. her trembling hands perfectly still for the first time since she'd arrived, and her blue eyes scanning the crowd, looking for the person who would react wrong, the person who would panic, the person who would try to run, because the trap had just been sprung. And in the next 60 seconds, everything was about to change. When does the hunter become the hunted? The lockdown alarms cut through the California afternoon like screaming metal. Trainees froze mid-stride, confused, uncertain. Training protocols demanded they move to designated assembly areas. But something in the air felt wrong. This wasn't a drill. Autumn stood motionless in the center of the training yard. Her torn shirt hung loose, the cobra tattoo fully visible now, a declaration, a challenge, and a target. Her trembling hands had gone completely still. For the first time since arriving at Coronado, they weren't shaking. Commander Sterling was moving fast, crossing the distance between the observation platform and Autumn's position. His hand was on his sidearm, not drawn, but ready. "Hayes," his voice was low, controlled. "We need to move you to a secure location." "Negative, sir." "That's not a request." "I know, sir." Autumn's blue eyes were scanning the crowd, cataloging reactions, every face, every expression, every micro-movement that might indicate guilt or panic or recognition. "They're watching," she said quietly. "Right now, whoever it is, they're watching to see what I do. Then let's give them something to watch while we get you somewhere safe." "With respect, sir, that defeats the purpose." Sterling stepped closer. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Your cover is blown. Your face is all over social media. Military intelligence says you're compromised." "Good. Good. That was the plan, sir." Sterling stared at her, understanding dawning like cold water. "You wanted your cover blown." "Yes, sir." "You wanted them to know who you are." "Yes, sir." Because agents don't run when they think they're safe. They run when they know they're burned." Autumn's gaze locked onto something across the yard, a figure moving against the flow of trainees. While everyone else was heading to assembly points, one person was moving toward the perimeter. Dr. Whitmore, the medical officer who'd been so interested in Autumn's files, who'd asked so many questions, who'd had access to medical records and personnel files and classified information. "Target acquired," Autumn said softly. Sterling's eyes followed her gaze. "Whitmore, she's been with us for 3 years. Excellent record." 3 years, starting right after the Mountain Viper unit was destroyed, right when someone would need to be embedded to monitor for survivors. The pieces clicked into place. Whitmore wasn't a compromised asset. She was a foreign intelligence officer, placed at Coronado to watch for any operators from the supposedly destroyed unit, to eliminate them if they surfaced. And Autumn had just painted a target on her back to draw Whitmore out. "Call it in," Autumn said, "but don't move on her yet. Let her run. Let her lead us to her handlers. And if she tries to kill you first." Autumn's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then she can try." Across the yard, Dr. Whitmore had reached the medical building. She disappeared inside. Security cameras showed her moving through corridors with purpose, not running, not drawing attention, but definitely not following lockdown procedures. She entered her office. 30 seconds later, the fire alarm in that building went off. Standard evacuation procedure would require everyone to exit the building, including security personnel. Perfect cover for an escape. Agent Pierce appeared at Sterling's shoulder. He'd arrived so quietly neither of them had noticed. A lean man in civilian clothes with eyes that missed nothing. "She's making her move," he said. "No introduction, no pleasantries, just facts." "We have the building surrounded," Sterling said. "She knows that. She's not leaving through the doors. Then how? Tunnels? This facility was built in the 1940s. The old steam tunnels were never properly sealed. We found the access point in Whitmore's office 3 hours ago. Autumn turned to Pierce. You knew. We suspected. Your operation confirmed it. How many others? At least 4 that we've identified. 2 more possibles. You drew out the primary handler. The others will activate contingency protocols within the next 12 hours. Then we need to move fast. Pierce nodded. Teams are already in position, but we need Whitmore to lead us to the communication dead drop. That's where we'll find the evidence we need to roll up the entire network. He looked at Autumn directly. And that means you need to chase her. Autumn's trembling hands flexed. Sterling noticed they'd started shaking again. The moment of stillness had passed. The tunnels are narrow, Pierce continued. Dark, cold, perfect environment for an ambush. I know. She'll be armed. I expect so. She's trained to kill. So am I. Pierce handed her a small tactical radio and a sidearm. We'll be tracking you through signal repeaters we placed in the tunnels. But if you get into trouble, we're 3 minutes behind you at best. Autumn checked the weapon, loaded, chambered, ready. 3 minutes is an eternity in a gunfight. I know. She looked at Sterling. Sir, I need you to do something for me. Name it. The trainees, especially Bryce Knox and Sloan Rhee, they need to understand what happened here, what they did, what they almost cost. Sterling nodded slowly. They're going to get a very thorough education in operational security and the consequences of social media in military environments. Good. Autumn moved toward the medical building. The fire alarm was still blaring. Trainees were evacuating in orderly chaos. She slipped through the confusion like smoke. Into the building. Down the corridors. To Whitmore's office. The access panel in the floor was open. Darkness beckoned below. Autumn pulled out a small flashlight, attached it to her weapon, and descended into the tunnels beneath Coronado. The ladder went down 20 feet. The air grew cold immediately. Damp. The smell of mold and rust and decades of abandonment. Her boots hit concrete. The tunnel stretched in both directions, north and south. Old pipes lined the walls. Steam condensation dripped from the ceiling. Her breath misted in the cold air. Her hands trembled, but her grip on the weapon was steady. Somewhere ahead in the darkness, a woman who'd spent 3 years pretending to be a doctor was running for her life. And Autumn was hunting, the way she'd been trained, in tunnels and caves and mountain passages. In Afghanistan, where she'd learned that the person with the steadiest nerves wasn't always the one with the steadiest hands. The radio crackled softly. Pierce's voice. We have thermal imaging showing movement 100 meters north of your position, moving fast. Acknowledged. Autumn moved forward. Silent. Controlled. The tunnel curved. Branched. A labyrinth beneath the military base. Whitmore knew these tunnels. She'd had 3 years to map them. But Autumn had spent 5 years in the Hindu Kush Mountains. In caves and passages where one wrong turn meant death. Where darkness was a weapon. Where trembling hands didn't matter when your mind was calm. Ahead a sound. Footsteps. Running. Autumn picked up her pace. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Caught a flash of movement ahead. Whitmore turned a corner. Autumn followed. Came around the corner and immediately dropped into a crouch. 3 rounds cracked through the air where her head had been. Muzzle flash illuminating Whitmore's face for a fraction of a second. Fear, desperation, calculation. Autumn returned fire. 1 round. Precise. Not to kill. To wound. To stop the flight. Whitmore cried out. Went down. Her weapon skittered across the wet concrete. Autumn advanced. Weapon raised. Flashlight trained on the woman who'd pretended to care about medical files, while actually cataloging potential survivors of a classified unit. Whitmore pressed her hand against her shoulder. Blood seeping between her fingers. You don't understand, she gasped. You don't know what they'll do. I know exactly what they'll do, Autumn said quietly. I've been in your position, desperate, alone, making choices that seem impossible. Then you know I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when they have your family. Autumn paused. They have your family. My sister, in Moscow, they said if I didn't cooperate. The radio crackled. Pierce's voice. Hayes, we have teams moving in. Hold your position. Within 60 seconds, the tunnel was flooded with operatives. Tactical lights, weapons, professional efficiency. Whitmore was secured. Medical treatment applied. Evidence gathered. The dead drop location was found. And with it, enough information to identify and neutralize a foreign intelligence network that had been operating undetected in American military facilities for over 5 years. Autumn stood in the tunnel, watching as they led Whitmore away. Sterling approached. That was exceptional work. Thank you, sir. You knew she'd run. Yes, sir. You knew exactly how to draw her out. That was the mission, sir. The mission, Sterling looked at her, really looked at her. 5 years ago in Afghanistan, you saved my life. I was doing my job, sir. You disappeared. Everyone thought you died. That was also part of the job. And you've been doing this ever since, going undercover, drawing out threats, living in the shadows. Autumn didn't answer. She didn't need to. The tremor in her hands said everything. A permanent reminder of the night in the mountains. The night when she'd held a position for 18 hours in sub-zero temperatures. The night when nerve damage became the price of survival. The night when she'd learned that the strongest people weren't always the ones who looked the strongest. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What does it cost to save the ones who'll never know you exist? The debriefing room was small, windowless, designed for conversations that couldn't be overheard. Autumn sat across from Agent Pierce, a cup of coffee between them that neither had touched. Her torn shirt had been replaced, the cobra tattoo covered again. Hidden, like everything else about who she really was. The network is bigger than we thought, Pierce said. His voice was measured, professional, but there was an edge of something else. Respect, maybe. Whitmore gave us access codes, contact protocols. We've identified compromised personnel at 7 different facilities. 7. Quantico, Fort Bragg, Naval Air Station Pensacola, Fort Benning, the list goes on. How long has this been running? At least 8 years, maybe longer. Autumn absorbed that. 8 years of foreign intelligence operations on American military bases. 8 years of secrets stolen. Personnel compromised. Operations betrayed. Whitmore's sister, she asked. We're working on that. State Department is coordinating with assets in Moscow. She deserves that much. Her cooperation bought her sister's life. You could have shot to kill in that tunnel. I could have. But you didn't. She wasn't the real enemy. She was a tool, a victim who became a perpetrator. Killing her wouldn't have solved anything. Pierce studied her for a long moment. You're different from most operators I've worked with. How so? Most people in your position would have become harder, more cynical. You've maintained your humanity. Autumn's blue eyes met his. The day I lose, that is the day I stop being useful to anyone. A knock at the door. Commander Sterling entered. He carried a file folder, thick, classified markings on the cover. "The trainees have been briefed," he said. "Sanitized version, operational security, the importance of protecting classified information even when they think they know what's classified and what isn't." "How did they take it?" Autumn asked. "Knox is humiliated. Ree is facing potential discharge for operational security violations. The others are shaken. They understand now that this isn't a game." Sterling set the folder on the table. "This is for you. Mission assessment, commendation recommendations, the usual paperwork." "I don't need commendations." "I know, but the people who read these files do. They need to know that what you're doing out there in the dark has value, that it's making a difference." He paused. "Because it is. You saved lives this week, not through firepower or aggression, through patience, through understanding human nature, through sacrifice." Autumn's hands trembled against the table. "The tremor," Sterling said quietly. "I remember now, the mountain position. How long were you stationary?" 18 hours. "In sub-zero temperatures?" "Yes." "Holding a rifle, covering our extraction?" "Yes." "We thought you died in the explosion that destroyed our escape route." "I almost did. The blast threw me into a ravine. Medical evac assumed I was KIA. By the time I made it to a hospital, the unit had been officially disbanded. Survivors scattered, identities buried." "And the nerve damage?" "Permanent. Cold exposure combined with sustained static positioning. The doctors said I'd never hold a rifle steady again." "But you can." "I adapted. The hands shake, but the core remains stable. The breath remains controlled. The mind remains calm." Sterling nodded slowly. "That's why they chose you for this work. Because you can hide in plain sight. Because people underestimate you. Because those shaking hands make you look vulnerable when you're anything but." "Vulnerability is a weapon when deployed correctly. A weapon that requires incredible strength to wield." Autumn didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth was written in every controlled breath, every cataloged detail, every mission completed from the shadows. Pierre stood. "Your next assignment is being prepared. Different facility, different threat profile, but the same mission. Find the compromised personnel, draw them out, neutralize the threat." "Time frame?" 2 weeks to prepare. We need to create a new cover identity, new background, new weaknesses for them to exploit." "Understood." "You'll be going into Fort Bragg, Special Forces training. The compromised asset is believed to be feeding information about counterterrorism operations to hostile organizations." "Rules of engagement?" "Identify, confirm, extract intelligence, capture if possible." Autumn nodded. "I'll need updated files on all training personnel, medical staff, support personnel, anyone with access to classified information." "Already being prepared." Sterling cleared his throat. "Before you disappear again, there's something you should know. The trainees, specifically Indy Rivers, she's requesting a transfer to intelligence operations. Because of what happened here. Because of what she saw in you. She said, and I quote, 'I want to learn how to be strong in ways that nobody expects.' Your influence reached further than just the mission parameters." Autumn felt something shift in her chest. A small warmth in the cold machinery of operational discipline. "She'll do well in intelligence." "She will, because she learned from watching you that strength isn't about being the loudest or the most obvious. It's about being underestimated and using that to your advantage." Sterling extended his hand. "Until we meet again, operator." Autumn shook it. "Until then, Commander." 3 days later, Autumn Hayes officially washed out of Navy SEAL training. Medical discharge. Neurological issues. Tremors too severe for operational effectiveness. The paperwork was processed, filed, forgotten, and Autumn disappeared back into the shadows, back into the world of false identities and covert operations, back into the life of being underestimated every single day. A life she'd chosen, a life that demanded everything, and gave back only the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere, someone was safer because of sacrifices they'd never know about. The briefing room in Fort Bragg was exactly like the one at Coronado. Small, windowless, sterile. Autumn sat with her hands folded on the table. They were trembling. They always were. A new commanding officer looked at her medical file with a frown. Says here you have a neurological condition. Yes, sir. Tremors in your hands. Yes, sir. And you think you can complete Special Forces training. I'd like to try, sir. The commander looked skeptical, as he was meant to. Across the base, a logistics officer named Marcus Chen was reviewing supply requisitions, looking for discrepancies, for patterns that might indicate someone selling information. He didn't know that in 2 weeks, a small woman with shaking hands would arrive at his facility. Didn't know she would be ignored and mocked and underestimated. Didn't know that she would be watching him and everyone else, looking for the signs that would reveal whether he was a loyal American soldier or a compromised asset selling secrets to the highest bidder. The game would play out again. Different base, different people, same mission, same sacrifice. Autumn left the briefing, walked across Fort Bragg's parade ground. The North Carolina sun was warm on her face. Her hands trembled at her sides, and somewhere in a classified database, Agent Pierce updated her file. Mission success. Assets neutralized, 7 confirmed, 3 pending. Network disruption, significant. Personnel saved from potential compromise, classified. Recommended status, continue operational deployment. Notes, Operative Hayes continues to demonstrate exceptional capability in deep cover counterintelligence operations. Her unique combination of apparent vulnerability and actual competence makes her invaluable for infiltration missions. Recommend continued deployment despite ongoing medical condition. The tremor that makes her appear weak is the very thing that makes her most effective. Additional note, Operative appears to bear the psychological weight of sustained isolation and deception with remarkable resilience. However, recommend periodic psychological evaluation to ensure mission effectiveness is not compromised by the emotional cost of maintaining false identities. Final note, in a world where most warriors seek recognition, Operative Hayes has chosen to be forgotten. This choice makes her extraordinary and irreplaceable. The file was closed, classified, locked away, just like the truth about the woman with trembling hands. The woman who saved lives by letting people believe she was broken. The woman who protected the warriors who would never know her name. The woman who proved that sometimes the strongest people are the ones everybody thinks are weak. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one standing quiet in the corner. The one with shaking hands and eyes that see everything. The one who knows that dignity doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need applause. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.